maternal and child health clinic projects. I see all of this, but oftentimes people don't know in the country where we're helping them or in our own country what we are investing in. So there's a lot that we could do better, and we are working to try to improve that. Secondly, we are doing a lot to try to make our aid sustainable. And by that I mean, except for humanitarian emergencies like after an earthquake or in the Horn of Africa with a famine, where we have to just come in and help save people's lives, we need to be asking ourselves, is what we are doing likely to be sustainable by our friends with whom we are partnering, either in their public sector or their NGOs? And we are moving very much toward country-owned, country-directed aid. Well, you know, that's kind of a change for a lot of our folks. So there's an enormous amount of ferment going on in our development efforts, including with USAID, but not exclusively there, because some other of our government agencies contribute as well.
I have one last question, and it relates to a speech which you gave many years ago as First Lady in Chicago at a dinner at the Hilton Hotel honoring our mutual friend Bill Brodsky. You had just returned from a trip to India, and you said something which has stuck with me ever since, in case you don't think you make an impression on people. You did. You said, if I go to one of the poorest countries on earth and I can only ask one question to find out how they're doing and what their chances are, it would be this: how do you treat your women?
Right.
I remembered that, and I've asked that question wherever I've gone. And it led me to introduce legislation which has passed the Foreign Relations Committee twice and the Senate, which has been stalled in the House of Representatives on the issue of child marriage.
I know. Thank you, Senator.
And I just hope that you can, at the G8 meeting or in other avenues, open up some conversation here. What happens to those poor little girls who become victims of a child marriage? It ruins their lives and sometimes literally kills them with an early pregnancy they can't handle.
Right.
So I hope you can join the voices that are both sides of the aisle here that are promoting that legislation.
We strongly support it. We were deeply disappointed that it died in the House for reasons that I don't think were directly relevant to the purpose of the bill. So we want to work with you and with a bipartisan coalition in the House to try to get it passed this year.
Thank you.
And if I take the chairman's prerogative here to praise Senator Durbin, who has been a he's been a consistent voice in this and in other issues that come also in the Judiciary Committee. But you, Madam Secretary, from your days as First Lady, you've been very consistent in this. You were as a member of the U.S. Senate. You've continued as Secretary of State. And I have to think that there are, as a result, in some of the efforts that have gone on, there are young women who may never know you or Senator Durbin or any of the rest of us. All they'll know is their lives are better. And I think that's what we strive for. And if we don't do that, then we don't deserve the privilege we have as citizens of this country, and in our case, citizens who do not have to worry about those kind of things. So I thank you both.
Thank you.
Senator Landrieu.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Madam Secretary, it's always wonderful to see you, and thank you for your leadership. And I also want to thank Senator Durbin and Leahy for their initiative on child marriage, and want to join them in supporting that initiative. I also want to commend you for your work with the Director of USAID on your reform efforts for how we deliver foreign aid. I think it's a major departure, but an important departure, Mr. Chairman, that I'm sure you're aware the Secretary and Dr. Shaw have been developing, which is to purchase more of the supplies and goods from the countries that we are attempting to serve, because it then has the added benefit of not only putting in the well or building the hospital or the clinic, but you're also stimulating the local business and local and entrepreneurship. Can you comment briefly about that initiative, and are you pleased with the way it's moving forward? Is there anything we can do to be more supportive?
Well, Senator, first, let me thank you for your very important focus on aid, and particularly on everything that we're trying to do for children around the world. You know, as part of our first ever quadrennial diplomacy and development review that I directed, we've all taken a hard look at how we can do our business more efficiently, produce better results in state and USAID. And under Dr. Raj Shah's leadership, USAID is moving forward on their AID forward agenda on how we can improve procurement, how we can improve the IT platforms that AID uses. In fact, how do AID and state work closer together to eliminate duplication and redundancy so that our separate missions are not wasting money on things that are essentially, you know, just the logistical part of being out in the world. So I think that on these indicators, and I can get you a fuller response for the record, of procurement, shifting toward more locally purchased goods and services saves money and gives us, therefore, more bang for the buck in delivering the aid that we're looking for. Looking at how we deploy people is giving Administrator Shah more flexibility so that he can more quickly move people from location to location, increasing the coordination between AID and state so that we're not reinventing the wheel every time there's an emergency. AID leads on humanitarian emergencies. State leads on, you know, political conflict emergencies. So we are really trying to do what we do better. We think it's part of our obligation, and I'm very proud of what AID is doing.
Well, please give us any specific updates as you can and keep us posted. I particularly want to be supportive. Second question on vulnerable children. Mm-hmm. As you know, several years ago, and Senator Leahy has supported this set-aside in the budget to focus on, it was authorized, but the Senator also supports it, a couple of $100 million for orphans and vulnerable children. And under your leadership and with the State Department and with this committee, we've been trying to focus that money, which is a large amount but small in relation to all of the PEPFAR money and others, on programs that can help better connect and serve children that are out of family care. And you agreed and spoke at the first conference directed. Can you give us a brief update about how the State Department or USAID can be a little bit more focused on trying to reach to those children who are just out of family care? They're either on the street, they're in institutions. How are we better connecting them to families, which every child deserves a permanent, loving, and protective family?
Well, you have been such a leader on this, and you know what we're trying to do is, number one, work with other nations to do more themselves to take care of their vulnerable children. Because you're right, we have children in sweatshops, we have children on the streets, we have children being trafficked into brothels. I mean, we have terrible kinds of situations for too many vulnerable children around the world. So we're tightening laws and regulations, we're training workers, judges, police officers, to just get them to focus on their own children, because no matter how generous we would want to be, we are just a small part of the solution. But with respect to what we're doing, we are working to improve adoption systems and out-of-home care for vulnerable children around the world. We had over 9,000 children finding permanent homes through inter-country adoption last year. We know that is an important part of what we can do to help these vulnerable children. We have to make sure that there are no scandals associated with them, that you don't have child kidnappings and thefts and all the other terrible things that go along with it. So we are pushing hard for broad-based acceptance of the Hague Convention on adoption. So we have a multi-pronged strategy, which you have helped us support by having the Congress be a partner, and we want to continue doing that.
Thank you. And my final question, I do want to mention Haiti and the opportunity that I had to go down to Haiti about a year and a half ago. I look forward to getting briefed by the chairman on his recent visit and just want to encourage our work. I know it's difficult. My final question, though, is about Latin America. The budget, and the President has recommended, which is hard for me to understand, and I know all budgets are tight, a $92 million reduction for the Western Hemisphere. With the recent escalation of drug trafficking in Guatemala, particularly the devastation in El Salvador due to the recent disaster that happened there, an unnamed storm, but nonetheless delivered as much rain and devastation as a named hurricane would just recently. How are we justifying this reduction, and are you concerned about it, and what can we do to show our support for these emerging Latin American democracies that are so important?
Well, I think, Senator, here is a potentially good news story to a great extent. You know, our assistance in the hemisphere seeks to promote citizen security. We have three of the most violent, well, the three most violent countries in the world are in Central America. We want to help them continue their work to develop durable democratic institutions, encourage economic and social opportunity, and emphasize clean energy as they try to link up all of their people with electricity. So the decrease in the FY 2013 request reflects a trend toward lower costs. Lower costs first because what we have learned is how to be more efficient in our security-related institution building programs. We are focusing on fewer areas of development in USAID in light of the overall economic progress in the hemisphere. So, for example, our request for citizen security programs is declining in part because two of our largest recipients, Colombia and Mexico, are transitioning from periods of intensive capital investment, you know, building police academies, building prisons, building courthouses, to equipment and training. And they're really looking at how they are sustainable. And I think this Congress should be very proud of the work we have done in Colombia and in Mexico over the last 15 years. And we are also trying to, you know, be smarter about how we ask Latin America to help itself. You know, we have some booming economies that are beginning to be aid donors themselves. So, for example, in Central American security, it's taken us some time, but we've invested heavily in diplomatic outreach to get Latin America, Canada, the European Union, specific European countries, all to work with us so that we would leverage the resources we put in. So I think, by and large, it's a good news story, but if there are specific areas that you remain concerned about, I would be very happy to know about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Madam Secretary, for being with us today. The first thing I'd like to ask you about is the situation with our NGO workers in Egypt who have been detained because of a travel ban. I was recently there with Senator McCain and also Senator Lindsey Graham, our ranking member, and several other senators. We had opportunity to meet with the detainees, and of course they're at the embassy, our embassy there. One of the detainees is from North Dakota. And so I had opportunity to visit with her, which I appreciated very much. We also met with the Muslim Brotherhood and the Freedom and Justice Party, the Speaker of their parliament, and others. And actually, the day after we were there, the Muslim Brotherhood, Freedom Justice Party put out a statement that I thought was very helpful. And I'm appreciative of Senator McCain and Senator Graham for leading that group over there to try to encourage that the travel ban be lifted. But it hasn't been, so I'm very concerned. And I would just ask you to give me whatever update you can on your efforts to get our 7 American NGO workers back here to the United States.
Well, first, Senator, thank you for going to Egypt. Thank you for traveling to these countries that are incredibly important to our future peace and security. We are engaged in very intensive discussions with the Egyptian government about finding a solution. We've had a lot of very tough conversations. and I think we're moving toward a resolution, but I don't want to, discuss it in great